What's up, everybody? Ben hopping on here to talk today about internal orgasms for men and how to go about this in the most effective, quick means to reaching these states. I get a lot of guys who reach out to me asking about this. You know, there's so many puzzle pieces, there's so many teachings, especially when you dive into Mantak Chia's books and Taoism and a lot of these ancient tantric practices teaching about the famed internal orgasm for men. There can be tons of puzzle pieces, it can feel like in the beginning, thousands of perspectives and practices and all this stuff. And I know when I first waded into this space, I was a bit overwhelmed at first, trying to sort all this out. Like, how do these puzzle pieces go together for us to actually experience firsthand these internal orgasms as men, multiple non-ejaculatory orgasms, full body orgasms, getting into that state of pleasure and bliss that's very similar to what we see women experience. And I can assure you firsthand, and from many of the men I've worked with, this is possible as a man, to go into these full body shaking orgasms. And I'm feeling like my fingertips light up even as I'm speaking about it right now. So what I want to go over today is just a really concise, straightforward DIY, like step-by-step process in how you can reach these internal orgasmic states as men. The first thing that I need to mention before going into any of this is, we talk a lot about this in the men's sexual mastery training, is that the flower doesn't fully bloom until the roots are solid, the stem is solid, the leaves are green, and there's no disease, there's no pests. In nature, sexual blooming, sexual fulfillment, the fullness of sexual expression, of reproduction, is the final stage of development in the organism. And so as within, so without, as we witness in the outside world, the same is true for us internally. So I like to just let guys know that like actually reaching internal orgasmic states is going to be a byproduct of you doing this deep inner work, of rewiring your nervous system, really was what's at the core of this. And you getting into coherence with yourself, with anything and everything that's standing in the way of actually your own self-love, believe it or not. Spoiler alert. This is all nervous system regulation. This is all internal coherence building. This is psychosomatic reprogramming of deep listening and feeling within our body. And this is the only way that we can really reach these states. So you can Google this stuff, you can YouTube it, you could spend the rest of your life, honestly, wading through videos, trying to figure this out, trying to find one technique or one hack that will change everything for you. And there are little things like the $1 million point, that you can find. A lot of guys stumble into this in the beginning of exploring this work, which is a special point that's located down in the perineum, which is the taint area between the balls and the anus, where you can literally put pressure. And when you're in the moment of ejaculation, if you hit it in the right spot, you put enough pressure, it stops the orgasm, stops the ejaculation from happening, and then it sends the energy back up inside of you. It's kind of like short-circuiting your orgasm. You don't end up ejaculating, and you can have experiences where what I'm going to be talking about, where the orgasm travels up the spine. You can start going into shakes and all sorts of stuff. I had an experience like this, I remember, in my early 20s, and I tried so hard to recreate it at some point, and it just, it was so difficult to find that $1 million point, But honestly, in the grand scheme of things, that is really limited. There's so much more deeper orgasms than what you can even have pressing the $1 million point. I'd say that's pretty basic level. And also I think there can be risks associated with that, because it's really abrupt. If you have all this sexual energy coming up and then you just dam it and it just hits this wall and comes back inside you, it's just not very organic flowing. And I am guessing there can be potentially health risks with that. Any sort of, trying to cheat code your way into this and opening up to new levels of pleasure and orgasm and energy, just in general, anytime we try to bypass any of the processes of actually cultivating a channel cultivating neural pathways, nervous system pathways that can handle the energy, it can actually cause more problems than we think. And this is what can happen in a lot of, if you hear of people getting really deep into Kundalini work, Kundalini awakenings, yoga, people just digging, trying to like activate this internal orgasmic state. Oftentimes you can have like an entire process of psychosis, of, you can Google this too, like go on YouTube, look up some of this. There's a danger in seeking, in eagerness, in trying to force this stuff, because it's playing with fire. Ultimately, our sexual energy, it's energy. And like if we don't have the capacity to hold it, it's going to just blow us out, just short circuit us. And as a side note, I would say this applies to all energy, whether that's sexual energy, whether that's power, money, fame, followers, technology, AI, like any of this stuff can lead to destroying itself. Look at people who win the lottery. It's like the worst thing that ever happened to them, like 2 years later. Their whole life is in shambles. Same is true for our sexual energy. So all that to say that you could explore the little quick hacks like the $1 Million Point, but what we teach at Men's Sexual Mastery is actually starting at the foundations, the roots, like we're talking about in this whole blooming process. So what are the roots? What we begin with in our training is starting with semen retention, or what we like to call semen intention, because we're not practicing retaining, repressing, shoving down the energy. We're practicing softening and opening up new neural channels, new nervous system pathways of pleasure. So the simple act of just holding on to your semen, not ejaculating for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. If you've never done this before, I highly recommend it. You don't have to take my word for it. See for yourself what happens when you start to hang on to your sexual energy. And you can, by the way, you can have all the sex you want. You can have all sorts of self-pleasure practices if you're single, or sex with a partner, by going into these practices. And this is actually what we encourage in our training, but just notice what happens subtly in your body. Notice what happens in your reality as you hang on to this energy. Again, you can YouTube semen retention. Look at some of the greatest business minds and business leaders talk about this. A lot of guys direct this energy straight into business or creativity. You have way more energy and stamina and clarity. There's all sorts of benefits outside of opening up pathways for deeper orgasms that can come with this. But specifically, sticking with the topic of reaching these deeper orgasms as a man, when you hold your sexual energy, it's basically going to start to show you where your blockages are. So the nature in Taoism, they say, and in traditional Chinese medicine, the nature of sexual energy is such that it binds and amplifies energy. So whatever's present in the body, whatever's present in the psyche of the individual, as you hold on to your sexual energy, it's just going to be turning up the volume knob on everything that's existing in your reality. And this is why turning up, cranking it all the way up with Kundalini energy can just, you can't handle it. You go into psychosis, because there are a lot of knots that we have to be worked out in the depths of our psyche, in the depths of our bodies, stories and programs that are keeping us from coherence, actually, from the deepest levels of our body, up into even our psyche itself. So as we practice semen retention and semen intention, as I call it, and especially in my one-on-one work, I'm guiding a lot of guys through just whatever's coming up, whatever needs to be worked out. It's going to clear out your life of everything that's not in true alignment with what you truly desire, with who you truly are. And I know this can sound a bit woo-woo, but it's, again, try it out. If you start holding your sexual energy, you're going to notice that things start shifting in your world. And you'll notice you start feeling better. You start feeling more in your core. And what we do in our training is then, so the next step is starting to develop these subtle senses. As we're holding our sexual energy, we can start to begin going into sexual spaces without an objective of ejaculation. This is key. When you enter a sexual space without an objective, it shifts the entire nature of the sexual interaction. It gets us out of that script of porn reenactment, which most of us are caught in without realizing it. That's all we've ever had. So you enter the bedroom, and whether this is with a partner or with yourself, you lose the screens, you lose the default mode network, the default programming of just getting off as quickly as possible. And you start to play with more of the subtleties of the energy. You start to explore just what's here. And especially if you're with a partner and you're holding on to your ejaculation, you can go deeper into your partner's pleasure and simultaneously allow them to give it to you and to practice receiving and opening. And there's a lot of teachings around, like, as the sexual energy builds up, especially as we're being stimulated, our nervous systems will start to contract. You'll notice that. And ejaculation is a sympathetic nervous system response. So our pelvic floor starts to constrict. So the practice, the tools, and a lot of what we teach in the men's sexual mastery program is, there's more than I could ever tell you in like a short little recording like this. But essentially what we're doing is developing these subtle pathways, these ways of relaxing and moving energy and rewiring the autonomic nervous system response that clenches when we experience pleasure, when we experience a spike in energy. And as we deepen in this practice, as we rewire that automated autonomic nervous system response to pleasure, even as we're receiving it, as it starts building up and we can feel it build up within us, this is our edging practices we're getting into. You just start to release, and you stay in the breath. You stay in a lot of vocalization is a lot of the foundations of the work we do. If you can imagine, you're right on the edge of orgasm. Shaking the body. And just focusing on staying present with the sensation, staying present with whatever is moving in the body is the core of this practice. This is meditation and mindfulness meets sexuality. And this is all key, tied in with the nervous system regulation. So what we do in these practices is we meet our edges, we come just inside our edge of the point of no return of ejaculation, and we keep deepening and relaxing, releasing, letting the whole body shake. And at this point, in my personal journey, I'll sometimes go into just full body shakes, and it just feels so good. There come these points where it's like, as you deepen in these practices, as you go deeper and deeper and expanding these neural pathways, you can start to, it's like a choice point you start to notice. Like it separates what was just a default programming of going into ejaculation, of not being able to hold on anymore. You develop this ability to almost like separate from it. And as you separate from it, the energy just spreads up the spine, throughout the body, to the tips of your fingertips. And you just start going into these full body shakes. Just like I feel my body like trembling right now talking about it. And it's incredible, especially when you're with a partner. Many women have never been with a man who knows how to move this energy. And I've had partners remark to me before, just like, holy shit, like, how can you do that? You're just like, she's in a state of ecstasis, of mind-blowing orgasm, and I'm just shaking, just like letting it travel through me instead of like clinging to it and attaching to it. There's like a level of just shedding, tension in the body, releasing, staying with the breath, staying with the vibration, the output of sound. And you're just going into these states. The more that you do it, the more you start to play around in these spaces. I call this playing a game with semen intention, with a lot of these Taoist alchemy practices. There's all sorts of these ancient tools, and this is what we teach in our training program for combinations of, perineum squeezes, what people call Kegels, reverse Kegels. There's all sorts of visualizations that over time, meditations that open you up to these subtle pathways of energy, of sexual energy in your body, that the more you start to feel and experience firsthand. And in the beginning, it's kind of like training wheels, like we're using guided meditations and visualizations, to connect with the movement of energy within the body. But then there comes a point where you can actually just drop the training wheels and you're connected to these sensations in your body. And that's when things can really get good, because you're continuing to release your mind, release your concepts of everything you've ever been told around sexuality, what it's for, what it can bring to us, what we can experience as men, as women, as human beings in these bodies. And these are transcendent levels of sexuality. These can become the most psychedelic, mind-bending, meeting God, the divine moments that we could ever have. The most profound, life-changing sex you could ever have in your life is what's waiting for you, is what's waiting for each and every one of us. And that's why I'm so excited to be sharing this information, to be part of this community, of people that are spreading this information, because it isn't really until today that this has been available. Even Mantak Chia's books, the most famous Taoist sexual alchemist, he published this stuff in the late 80s, and even then it was so obscure and it was so hidden, for millennia. This was held by the Taoist elites. This is what was, technology, spirit technology, I call it, that was used to build empires. They knew the power of this technology, of our sexual energy, and the rest of us, have been under a system of repression and control, and that's okay. But the time is now that the information's out there. And so even when Mantak Chia published this stuff in the late 80s, I had a mentor of mine mention to me that, he was threatened by all sorts of the Chinese mafia and all these things. This stuff is just now surfacing. And just now in 2025, it has never been more ripe than ever to be connecting this in to the technology, to the information that we have access to. So that's what this work is all about. And I appreciate each and every one of you for even just showing up in this space. As a man, if you felt called into this space, if you're even tuning into this right now, there's something that's awakening in you. And that which is awakening in you is awakening within me. And this work, this sexual healing work, truly goes to the root of it all. So if you feel called to join us in our trainings, there's a seat for you at the table, brother. And I hope that this recording, has been helpful for you just in learning a little bit about the foundations of how this energy can be cultivated and circulated throughout the body, what the pathway is like, what the process is like to become a multiple orgasmic man. So thank you all again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Send a big love your way. See you soon.